Welcome to the virtual seminar update on the search for our new minister. My name's Mary Ann Schmink.
I'm Taylor Stein.
And together we are Schminkenstein. We're presenting this virtual seminar on behalf of the search committee. As you know, UCG has made the decision to suspend in-person gatherings to keep everybody safe and healthy, and we look for creative ways to continue our work. At the moment, we're planning to continue to move forward with the search for our third minister because we recognize it's really important for our church. We'll make whatever necessary adjustments we need to as we go along, just like we have today, making this seminar an online seminar. And the Board of Business is monitoring the situation closely and is engaged in some planning for contingencies in case our finances are impacted by the COVID-19. Before we begin, I want to point out what you see on the screen is the information if you need technical support. Our search committee member, Alan Hill, is serving as our support person via email and text, and you can reach him using the information on the screen. It was also in the emails we sent out to you. This is our wonderful search committee. All of our members have been very involved in our search, and our goal is to move forward with the search. This is our planned timetable. We've done a lot of preparation for this moment. We hope to be able to launch the actual search, post the job announcement very soon. We have a timetable for the future, which we will adjust as needed. But if we are able to move forward now with posting the job announcement, we can take advantage of the next few months to get to know some candidates, have some conversations with them, and begin to try to identify our favorite candidate. So our goal is to finalize and post the announcement this month. Before talking about the job description, we wanted to review some of what we have learned by working together with UCG leaders, including the ministers, the moderator-elect, council exec, other key board and committee chairs, to listen to the congregation, help to focus on concerns about our governance, and propose ways to move forward to address those things, and also provide clear direction for the search committee. This leadership group prepared a report that you've all received, analyzing some of the themes on which we have a lot of agreement and others where there's some misunderstanding about UCG's history and past practices and some things that we need to clarify further. So I'm just going to review those things next. One thing we all agree on is we love UCG. No one wants to divide this congregation. We want to continue in a very open process where we listen actively to each other and find common ground. We know everyone will not agree with all decisions, but it's important that we have inclusive answers and we address as many of our collective concerns as possible. Another area of wide agreement is our care and concern for our current ministers. We want an environment where Andy and Talia's ministries can continue to flourish. There's general praise for the jobs they're doing and a lot of appreciation for their hard work during this extended transition period, especially now that we're facing such a big crisis. And while many people have concerns about the search process, there was a lot of confidence expressed in the process, in the committee, and we're very grateful for the trust that you've given to us. You also shared your feedback on the top desired competencies of our next settled minister, and Taylor's going to talk about this in more detail later, but these were the top 4 competencies that the congregational survey revealed, we want someone who's creative and stimulating worship leader and preacher. We want someone who can reach out and connect with people of all ages. We want someone who recognizes and respects spiritual diversity and who's willing to be a part of a collaborative team. There's a lot of agreement around the fact that UCG governance has always been collaborative, and we want it to stay that way. We want also to build on this foundational strength and potentially find ways to strengthen it. One of the most surprising things that came out of the listening sessions was that members had very similar concerns no matter which ministerial leadership model they might prefer. They were concerned about clarifying how administrative oversight would work, shared decision-making, accountability, and attention to the details of church management. Some of the areas where further clarification was needed are evaluation and accountability among the ministers and with respect to the congregation. Some people don't know too much about how UCG actually works, or the roles of the church council or the congregation ministry review board in decision-making and in ministerial oversight. So some think that we need to improve and enhance the CMRB's effectiveness, for example, and find better accountability mechanisms. With regard to the senior title, senior minister title, a couple of things that came from those listening sessions was people tend to think of this signifying more about experience than about age or hierarchy. And secondly, there was a lot of concern that we wanted to have someone who could oversee the whole 360-degree picture of how the church functions. Now, there was some confusion about what senior minister means in UCG, because a lot of people referred to their experiences with other churches, with jobs, even with their family. But at UCG, our senior minister has never had, for example, the authority to hire and fire junior clergy. That's always been something that is decided with the congregation and with our boards and committees. So the senior minister has been someone who wore that mantle lightly at UCG. So UCG leaders identified these 5 challenges for discussion and for seeking ways to address these challenges in the future. And this has been some of the background for leading into how we have framed the job description as part of the outcome of these reflections. And with regard specifically to our search, church leaders, including Andy and Talia, propose to maintain a coordinating function in the job description of our next settled minister, using the term coordinating minister to describe the task of the minister who makes sure that the machinery of the church is working. So now I'm going to turn this over to Taylor. He's going to take over and talk to you about our job description and how we've come up with our proposed job announcement.
All right. Let me see if I can get this all to work here. Cool. Hopefully you should be seeing my screen now. It says congregational input into the job description. Also, I just want to let you know, while you're all muted, you still have the ability on the chat function, which you should see down in the bottom middle part. Hannah Norton, one of our search committee members, is ready and willing to start seeing what your chats are. So if you have questions, comments, you can put those into the chat function, and then at the end of my presentation, then we're going to basically, we can go back and look at some of your comments and questions and talk about those a little bit more. We're just trying to keep everything muted right now to maintain some sort of control over this. Still new to this stuff, so we're trying to figure it out. Okay, so yeah, so thanks, Marianne, for giving us basically a good description of the listening sessions and where we are to here. I'm going to start getting into the fundamentals of our job description, which hopefully will again go out pretty soon. We want to try to get this out by the end of March. But to get to that, it's taken a lot of work by itself. And this is separate from those listening sessions, even though, as Marianne mentioned, those listening sessions did contribute to helping form this job description. So if you might remember, we were working with the youth. We've done a lot of different things in getting input, but really it started off kind of early February where Taylor Williams and Lindsay Tell, basically working with Talia, started doing things with the kids. We had a fun children's story back in early February, I think it was, where they did a Mad Libs job description where the children's story basically allowed the kids to have a say in it. You know, we really want them to feel a part of this. This is going to be a person they're going to see up in front of the church a lot, and I think it's going to be very valuable for them to have the idea that they were part of helping form that decision. And there's things in there I'd love to try to get into the job description. I think they should be wise like a cheetah, but also funny like a monkey would be great for our job description. Probably can't fit it in there. That might be a little too crazy. However, I totally agree with that. On to other things. Taylor, Lindsay, and Talia also worked closely with the kids during their in the classes, and they spent time basically drawing pictures and talking about what they love, what they would like to see in a new minister, things that loving, kind, and friendly, wonderful things to be hearing from the kids, and something that we're trying to incorporate. I think again a big part that we'll be looking at when we see new ministers is fun. The kids come right out and say it. We always have to be a little held back, but I think we all want fun as well. So this will be something I think that's going to highlight when we're looking for new ministers. We also engaged with the UCG youth, the middle school and the high school folks, and went into during their session and basically talked to them about what traits and responsibilities they would see this new minister, this new position taking on. And they actually wrote their own job description, which was fun to look at because it actually had a lot to do with it looked similar to our draft job descriptions that we were doing in the search committee. So these folks are right on par with this, which was really nice. So on par that we're going to continue to work with them. They elected a youth liaison who we're going to incorporate into the search process as we move forward too. So we'll get some of the youth in there to have a say. And I know some of you actually asked us about this a few months ago, so I'm happy to say that we're going to still work closely with the youth, even though it's still Talia's responsibility working with the youth and the kids. This person's going to have a role with them because they're going to be such an important part of the church. So I'm glad that the youth can still play a role. We also went to you. So this was how the basic way we got your input was working through a survey that we sent out to all members and regular visitors to the church. So the core competencies was something that I had to learn. This was my first search, but you're talking about the ministerial competencies is something that UCC churches do in almost all searches for ministers, and we've done it for our big searches as well. What's nice is that a lot of these competencies are relevant to all types of ministers that we have. And so what we do is we work with these and adapt them for every new search. So I believe we probably had Talia's, the last time we worked on these was when we hired Talia. John Engels and other leadership looked at these competencies and adapted them for where they saw the position was going. It came to our search committee, and a subgroup of our group of the search committee worked on them, fine-tuned them to make them even more specific for what we were looking at. Then we sent out these 9 competencies using a Qualtrics survey back in January, February, I think we did that, where you were able to rate them in terms of most important down to, I would say, 9th most important. All of them are important, and so we just wanted to see what your priorities were to make sure that we were on the right path. So even though I'm going to make it sound like high and low, it's really all high, it's just the different priorities. So in terms of what came out the high, what was interesting is these top 4 really clustered together well. They were only within a few tenths of a point of each other. And some of them aren't surprising. Broad experience in creative and stimulating worship leadership. This is how the majority of our congregation really interacts and sees all of our ministers. And so we want a strong worship, someone to lead us in worship. So that's not a big surprise. It was a high priority. Again, this connection with the ministers. So that's basically leading the worship, but also more personal things, initiating conversations and connections was almost as equally as important. And also something that's very common about our church is embracing our spiritual diversity. We're very proud of this. It's it's something that is very important about our church, and therefore it's something that if we're bringing in a new person, they need to be able to be open to this and embrace it and make their ministry part of the spiritual diversity. And then it got into that collaboration. You saw that Marianne talked about this several times. Collaboration is something that's on our congregation's mind, and it really showed up here in our survey where they want to see solid leadership and collaboration skills. So that person, they want to see work well with the other ministers and with the lay leadership. So the other 5, also important, but I think get more into how this person does the job, maybe not as upfront as leading worships and communicating directly with the congregation. So good communication skills. We want to see somebody with good experience and training in planning and management and organizational development, so that's basically how they keep that big picture, that overseeing of the church. Someone who can work well with staff and lay members too. Developing a public presence, which we expect of all our ministers too, and this person will be working with all 3 of our ministers to do that. And then also a track record of setting boundaries and balancing personal needs and professional life. All important, but you can see kind of a little bit down the line in what the congregation determines. Okay, that was looking inward to our church. We also looked outward. What's been interesting, and if anybody is interested in doing this, you can go to the United Church of Christ website and look at all the positions that churches around the country are advertising for. And the search committee has done this a lot, and we've noticed a lot of diversity out there, but also a lot of common patterns within these position descriptions, and that gave us a model on how we were going to do ours. I don't want to read these to you, but I just want to give you some examples. I believe you all have the PowerPoint. That should have been sent out to you a few days ago, and then we're recording this session, so hopefully you can come back and review this here too. But again, just go to the UCC site and you can see all the types of position descriptions. Here's one from Ohio. As you can see, this is just examples about the size of our church, and it's interesting how these churches write their position descriptions. This one is interesting because it's mostly about themselves. They're describing their church and what they're proud of and how they see this new senior pastor that they're advertising for fits into their church. So most of this is just describing this to them. So I think this is a good example that when we write these positions, we want to highlight what is important to us and what we find valuable about our church, just like the Sylvania Church does. And that will do a couple things here. I think it will hopefully attract the right people and maybe not attract the wrong people. For example, if somebody sees something here and they don't agree with it or say that's not that type of church I see myself going into, then they can make that decision not to apply. So it's, as this church does, they're very clear on who they are. This one also does that. It's a little smaller church here looking for a senior pastor in Wisconsin. This church just sounds like a fun one to go to. I mean, the way they're immediately bragging about themselves, spiritually alive, joyfully inclusive, committed to justice. Just sounds like a wonderful place. And they go again into a lot of what they specifically are about themselves. They mention about being a progressive Christian community and things like that. They get a little into what they want the minister to know and minister to do in a more general way. But you can see, again, a lot about themselves, trying to find that match. Here's one out of Maine. This one, again, is a lot about themselves. If you can see, the beginning usually talks a lot about the church itself, and then as it goes into, starts talking a little bit more specifically about what they expect a minister to be doing. In this case, they get down to who they believe the minister will be engaging with. There's an associate pastor in the case up here in Maine, so they'll be saying you'll be working with this as well as other staff. And then finally, we got another one. This is from a smaller church, and this would be a hard one to write because these smaller churches only have one minister. So here they have the job of describing who they are. And these churches are amazing. 185-year-old church, just amazing. New England has those type of churches. And so it really talks about, that's a special kind of church somebody would want to come to. And then they talk a lot in this one about the type of aspects this person would be doing. Again, they call this person pastor full-time. basically this person would be in charge, would be the pastor for the church. So that's some examples of other churches. Let's show you ours. So here is our draft job announcement. I'll slow down a little bit here and read it all to you so you can get a good feel for what it is. You can see our title, just as Marianne said. We're going to call this person just a minister. We don't have senior minister as the title. The United Church of Gainesville, located in a vibrant university city in the heart of North Central Florida, is a progressive, open, and affirming theologically diverse congregation of over 600. We have a thriving youth and children's program and a passion for social justice, including major outreach ministries addressing issues of homelessness, incarceration, food insecurity, and racial inequity. We are seeking a highly collaborative minister with exceptional preaching skills and experience in creative, stimulating worship leadership that draws deeply from many faith traditions. Our candidate must connect well with people of all ages and diverse spiritualities and be able to assist our congregation with the care and counsel they need over the course of a lifespan. This coordinating minister will oversee the executive administrative operations of the church as part of a collaborative ministerial team, drawing on prior demonstrated successful experience with oversight of medium to large organizations. We are looking for someone who will both energize and be energized by our highly capable ministerial and lay teams, and who desires to personally grow and adapt with us as we seek to meet the needs of the church and our communities for the foreseeable future. So that's where we are now, and hopefully as I read through that and you read it, you could see a lot of what Marianne discussed in the listening sessions, as well as what we came up with when we're looking specifically at job description within this relatively short paragraph. I mean, when I look at this, it's almost magic how cohesive we got some of these really important aspects that we want to get out of the minister. So a lot of work was done in how to word specific sentences and what words we want to use to get this very complex message out to a prospective client or applicant. Now that is what is going to go out and is going to be publicized widely. What they'll later see as people dive into this is the specific detailed descriptions of the new minister's duties. And so on these, we've also worked a lot with on the fine tuning of it. As you know, this position, let's see, is going to be, we've drafted these duties, understanding we have 2 other ministers with us. So really we want the positions to be of the current ministers. And so as you go through these, you might see things you're going to want to comment on in terms of how this one position is, as well as how they complement the other ministers. So again, we're using that chat function. So if you have comments, you can throw them in there, as well as you're going to be able to send emails out at the end, and we'll give you an email address towards the end. So let me get into these details a little bit more. Oh, before I do though, as you know, I mean, this person is basically our replacement for Shelley. So we did make some significant changes from her position description. We're not going to go into all the details of those positions. This slide is basically to show you of how we were moving. That collaborative aspect that's been a focus throughout the listening sessions, and what we've seen this position really needing to be is and value, and we need to describe that collaborative aspect. We tried to do by making some changes to the old job description. So like in brief, the first one, changing senior minister to minister is one. And also when we refer to the other ministers in the job description and these details, we're not going to call them associate ministers, we're just calling them ministers. And there's some other wordings here that I'm going to go over again specifically in these next few slides. But really the message we want you to see, get out of this, is that the way we're changing these wording is to highlight the collaborative nature of this job and make it seem more collaborative. Also, some changes from Shelley's position is that there's some responsibilities and groups that current ministers are now overseeing and staff is overseeing that this person we're thinking will not oversee. And so we're going to leave those, like lively arts, children programs, they're not going to be part of this job description because basically we have ministers and staff doing that now. Also, we added the line, and this is always something when you do job descriptions, other responsibilities to be determined in consultation with other ministers and lay leaders. That gives us the flexibility to basically get into the details as we move through the search, as well as when we see who this candidate is and who this person is going to be, what strengths they bring, is that we are going to be able to work with those details. And how those, again, going back to how that person's going to complement what Andy and Talia do. So by working together, they'll form a strong team. Okay, so like I said, they're going to be seeing a lot more of the details in this as they explore this position more, and as we describe it. This also gives us a good direction of where we want, what we're thinking about in hiring a person. So basically that first sentence there is a general description of, again, highlighting the collaborative nature of the job. Then these bolded numbered bullets are basically describing what we want this person to do. Not a surprise on this first one, it's planning, leadership, and preaching of worship. And so that is a big part and something that's a core competency. A lot of this wording is similar to past searches, but we will be, as you can see, the little wording that has been changed is talking about working with the other minister's team, being a little bit more collaborative. You'll see that throughout these job description duties. As probably most of you know, each minister oversees certain boards, committees. And so in this case, that first one, we're talking about what boards they're going to resource and oversee. Board of Parish Ministry, Board of Business, CMRB, and Board of Membership is what we're now talking about, this person basically primarily taking the lead and overseeing. Also, this person will participate in church council and council exec, just like the other ministers do, primarily working with the moderator-elect, looking over the 3-year plan, working with the nominating committees as we create new boards and committees, and then also overseeing the office and ministerial staff. And then you can see there is that wiggle room where we're talking about other responsibilities will be identified as we work together. In terms of leadership, basically not surprises here is that they'll be involved in the planning and the leadership of our annual planning conference, as well as the all-board kickoff, which I know many of you are all involved in. If you've been in any part of doing leadership with the boards and committees or taken part of boards and committees, you've done this. So this person will have a big role in those type of meetings, as well as leading seminars, taking an active role with retreat. Pastoral care is going to be an important part of this job, but again, they all do this. All 3 ministers do this. So doing weddings, baptisms, memorial services, and then working with the other ministers to help address members in need. They'll all 3 be as a team and organize how to do that. Coordinating and supervision, so they're going to be leading the weekly staff meetings, again, providing that guidance. They're going to be supervising the ministerial team, but with the mutual accountability among the ministers and with the CMRB. And then finally, they're going to have the supervision over key staff members. So as you know, we have key staff that is either full-time or part-time in the church, the office administrator, the accountant, our sound system managers and tech coordinators. This position is going to be directly supervising those folks. Okay, and then just to wrap this up, basic stuff that ministers do, but in our case, we're saying the minister is going to do this, but we always want to make sure they're doing it as a team. And so working with the wider community and with other denominations out there, that this person will be working with Andy and Talia to say how are they going to be the face or faces of UCG. And then we always want to highlight the personal professional care. We understand that when basically this makes us a good job when we highlight that these people will get time to themselves, but we also are selfish in a way that we know that people who take care of themselves go off, have different experiences, and take good care of themselves. That shows up in them being better pastors for us. Okay, so I'm going to be wrapping this up. The search committee, we're preparing to post this job before the end of March. So that job description that you saw, hopefully with just maybe a few little changes, is going to go off and be public. We're going to be collecting applications and beginning interviewing candidates over the summer. Understanding the world is chaos right now. It's hard to, it's weird to be saying we're making long-term plans. From what we can see though, actually, doing these types of meetings and seminars, our search committees already had successful Zoom meetings. So the places where we actually have to interact in groups, we are moving forward well, I think, in this case. Sending out the search was going to be doing remote stuff anyways. In fact, some of our first interviews with candidates would be probably over Zoom and separate. So really our time frame as we see it right now isn't being too disrupted by what's going on. But as you all know, every day there's new news and new events. So we're doing our best to stay on task. This is an important priority for this church, and we want it to move forward, but it has to be done well given the current world situation. So that last bolded statement there, you probably have comments. Some of you actually have ideas on things or questions. ideas for the job description. Marianne will be taking those emails up until March 27th, and that's when we hope to have this job description finalized and we can basically get it out there and get it public. As Marianne mentioned, that first part of our presentation today dealt with the leadership framework. There's a lot of details there, and we trust our CMRB and our lay leaders and the ministers, including, I'm going to say, we're trusting our new minister that we're going to hire in there to work on a process to really define how we're going to go through ministerial reviews and the accountability and decision-making aspects that Marianne talked about. So that's going to be coming up and those are big details that those teams need to work together, as well as the board of business and compensation committees are going to be working together to form a financial package that deals with the salary and benefits for this person, as well as the costs that go on with doing this search. As we learn that stuff, we're going to continue to communicate with all of you through seminars and all the other ways that we can talk. Okay, so I think that wraps it up for me. Marianne, if you want to come back on.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. Sounds good. We have a couple of questions by chat. Should we just take them in order? Or
Sure.
Hannah, do you have another proposal? Hi, everybody. So
should I unmute Hannah?
Yes.
I'm going to unmute Hannah. Hopefully this doesn't unmute everybody. So if it does, mute yourselves. All right, there's Hannah.
Oh, thank you, Taylor.
Yeah.
We have a couple questions about coordinating minister. The notion of coordinating minister went by a little too fast for me. Can you please elaborate on where this comes from, what this means, or whether this is only a side comment from the ministers? And then also a comment that says the term coordinating minister connotes administrative duties, which in my opinion could be fulfilled by a different person, i.e. DAR. So those were the two that are about the coordinating minister.
Okay, I'd like to take a crack at responding to that. This has been a big discussion. Thank you, Hannah, for organizing us. This has been a really big discussion in the listening sessions. One of the themes that came up over and over again was the need for someone where the buck stops, someone who is the person seeing the whole picture. So this is not just an administrative task, it's an oversight task, as I understand it. It connotes someone who has the responsibility and the authority to be looking at the whole picture from the level of the ministerial team. I don't know if, Taylor, would you add anything or?
No, I mean, the wording there's been a lot of, everything we do in terms of this job description, we've fine-tuned the word and debated a lot of things on this. Going to coordinating ministry, that came from CMRB, at least where I first heard it. We've talked among the leadership group. Ministers have been involved in that. So that term coordinating minister, a lot of thought has gone on to it. And it was nice that we basically all came to a pretty shared agreement on using that term to move forward.
Great. We had a question, is there a more in-depth description of the governing structures of church council, CMRB, et cetera, that are mentioned in the job duty details? So I think maybe that would be stuff that's in the church profile. Is that right, Marianne?
We do have, so we didn't mention that there is also an extensive church profile document, which is part of, it will be linked to the job posting. It's up to almost 40 pages of description of UCG, every aspect of us. But it doesn't actually, it lists our governing structures and in briefly. But since we're a search committee, we didn't focus on the other governance questions that we've been talking about. We focused on how they related to the job description. And so that all we have in the profile, which we can make public once it's finalized soon, is a description of our boards and committees and the process by which decisions go from boards to the church council to the congregational meetings.
Okay, we also got a loved basic description of jobs, so thanks for your positive feedback. If other people, those are the only questions that are written in the chat. I think the chat is still the easiest way for us to get questions, so we don't have people talking over each other. But so if you have other questions, please feel free to type them in.
Crickets.
It's weird to write your questions, so I think it's good to give people some time to try to get something down and hit that enter button.
I have to say I'm enjoying just looking at all your faces.
I think Anne is bird watching while she's doing the seminar. That's very impressive, Anne.
Yeah, it's great to see. We had, I think, 54 listed participants at our height here, and then a lot of you are 2 or more in a screen, so more than. So how did you get the cool background, Taylor? Sorry,
it's been taking me weeks to figure that out. I've been playing with Zoom for 2 weeks, and I finally figured that out.
So also there's a question about how to get this PowerPoint. This PowerPoint was sent out to the whole church congregation on Friday afternoon in a PDF format that allows you to see the slides and also the notes that show more or less the script we followed. We're also recording this, and this will be made available on the YouTube channel. So you should be able to have access to it easily. And in fact, you already should have it.
Yeah, I realized that a lot of those slides had a lot of text on them, and I didn't read it. So yeah, just go back to that email sent just a few days ago, and you can really go in. We even left our notes, so you got full transparency there. You can see everything that Marianne and I were basically scripting, and hopefully we actually said.
So we have another question. Would it be important to include the size of the ministerial team in the job description?
That's an interesting idea. Maybe we should say 2 other ministers at some point.
It's definitely in the church profile, but again, that's a large document for people to look through.
Yeah, it's not a hard fix. That's a good addition. I think one of the job descriptions said associate minister, so it was easy to see there. We could just say R2. So.
Just by word of mouth, has anyone shown interest in the position?
There were some people who were being contacted about the transitional minister position who actually withdrew from that because they were interested in this position. We haven't tried to talk to people yet about it. That's all I can tell you at this point.
Yeah.
Dar says, a note, our bylaws cover governance and committees, and any applicant worth their weight will ask for a link to those. That was my experience anyway of candidates who inquired to the transition minister search team. And we got a bravo to the team, so thanks again for nice feedback. And then just a reminder in this weird time how important it is to keep up your pledge, and if you support Through the Plate, to donate via Catherine's instructions. Thanks for that reminder.
So, as you think about this, as you go back through and look at the PowerPoint, you can actually read things. Please send us any further thoughts you have by email. And we're looking very closely at everything you send us. It's extremely helpful. We really appreciate your input.
Yeah, especially the people I'm seeing on the screen have put a lot of work into where we are now, either by helping to write these position descriptions and also just giving us input. So I really appreciate everything that you all have done. and especially goes to Marianne and John and the rest of the leadership team who just magically got these really complex issues that we've been gathering from all of you and put it into some really well-worded position descriptions. I'm just presenting it to you. These folks have done a lot of work. So I'm excited that just in a few days, hopefully, this is going to be real and this is going to be out there that people can see. And we can actually start dealing with real human beings here pretty soon that will be coming to us.
We did have another question come in. Has someone in a church of a similar size looked at the description to comment if they think it is doable? It looks like a lot for one person, especially with some of the buck stops here responsibilities.
I don't know. That's some good advice. We might want to talk to Andy or Talia, who know other churches out there, and run it by somebody.
We have had input from other. We're blessed to have several retired ministers in our congregation. They've been a part of these discussions, reviewing these things. We haven't had anyone tell us. One of those people said that he would probably be tempted to apply for this job, so that sounded like an endorsement.
We did have another person who had that same concern, and then some more great jobs and thanks for your work, guys.
Well, Taylor, shall we wrap it up?
I guess so. I'm looking. It seems like we're just getting nice complimentary chats now. I could just sit and look at those.
Yeah, keep that going.
But no, we probably need to move on. So yeah, if there's nothing else, I appreciate, again, everybody who has, this is just one thing of the many things you've all done for us. So thanks for being a part of this, and we look forward to moving forward. I'll let you end it, Marianne.
Okay, stay safe, everyone. We love you. Go watch your morning worship service. It's very nice. And we are finding ways to be together, and it's very good to be together. Thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Hannah.